It was a summer evening on Tuesday, 20th August 1977, in Enfield, North London. Peggy Hodgson, a mother of four, went into her daughter's bedroom to tell them to stop bickering and to go to sleep. Janet, aged 11, and her older sister Margaret, 13, told their mother their bed was shaking. Peggy thought it was just another of the girls' antics, and after switching off their bedroom light, she went to bed. The next night, she heard noises coming from her daughter's room again. Annoyed, she opened their door to tell them to pipe down when she heard a shuffling noise, like someone walking about in the same room, wearing slippers. Then came 4 loud knocks on the walls. A chest of drawers slid across the floor. Peggy pushed it back. Immediately, it slid forward again. She tried to push it back, but felt some force pushing against it. She fled the house with her children, seeking help from the neighbors next door. This was the beginning of an ordinary London family's terrifying 18-month ordeal, a haunting that so shocked 1970s Britain, it was investigated by the authorities, research institutes, newspapers, and international paranormal investigators. It inspired TV series and movies, most famously Conjuring 2, based upon the American paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren's involvement. This is the true story of the Enfield Poltergeist. So folks, lock your doors, shut your windows, turn down your lights, come with me into the other side.
Is anyone here? What did you find?
You are listening to Supernatural Confessions.
Enfield is a suburb in North London, about 10 miles from the hustle and bustle of the Big Smoke. It has a thriving market town since the 14th century and is a very popular residential area due to its calmer suburban feel bordered by an ancient forest. In this quiet oasis on the night of August 20th, 1977, Vic Nottingham and his son Gary were woken up from their sleep by urgent knocks on their front door. They opened it to see their next-door neighbor Peggy Hodgson with her children outside, clearly in distress. The two men immediately went over to the Hodgson's house to investigate and heard knocks coming from all over the house. Thinking someone was playing a prank, they called the police. The police arrived at the house at 1 a.m. and immediately began checking all the walls, attic, and pipes for signs of forced entry or electricity and water disturbances. While the police and the neighbors were checking the kitchen, another officer stayed behind with the Hodgsons in the living room. At some point, the lights in the living room were switched off to test for possible electric malfunction. Suddenly, the elder son pointed to a chair. The officer looked at the chair and noticed it was wobbling from side to side. It then slid across the room towards the kitchen by about 3 to 4 feet before coming to a stop. Though this was recorded in the police's report, they were unable to carry out further investigations due to the lack of evidence of forced entry or foul play. The calm that followed the police's departure did not last long. The next night, the neighbor went back to the house to check on the family and was attacked with flying Lego that came from nowhere. Over the next 3 days, marbles and Lego blocks began flying around the house on their own accord. Various people, including members of the local council and clergy, visited the family in an effort to help, but could not put a stop to the activity. 2 weeks later, and out of desperation, the neighbors rang the local newspapers, the Daily Mirror, hoping they could offer some help. A reporter and a photographer were sent to the property. They later reported, I quote, "I thought it was an ordinary job until I walked into the house. I stood in the gloom in the kitchen, and one by one, they brought the children into the adults' arms, and the last one to come in was Janet. Suddenly, things just took off and started flying around the room. I got hit by a Lego brick over my right eye. It gave me a lump for a few days. There was a bit of force, There were marbles and things left in the kitchen that were just flying about the room. I was watching all of the family, and none of them was doing anything. A senior reporter and a second photographer were sent by the same newspapers to visit the house. At first, the reporter believed that Peggy was playing tricks in order to get a new council house, but he soon realized that something serious was going on due to the highly charged atmosphere in the neighborhood, ranging from hysteria to terror and tension. He eventually eliminated the possibility of trickery and concluded any faking could only be done by an expert. That same day, the reporter contacted the Society for Psychical Research, SPR. The SPR is a non-profit scientific organization founded in Britain in 1882 whose early members included justices of peace, members of parliament, notable scientists, writers, and academics from the universities of Cambridge and Harvard. Soon after the call, they assigned a member of the society, Maurice Gross, to visit the house the next day. Gross arrived to find total chaos with the whole family congregating in a house with the neighbors, all of them extremely frightened. Gross and members of the press decided to stake out, waiting to witness any incidents. They didn't have long to wait, for 3 days later, on Wednesday the 8th of September at 1:15 a.m., they heard a loud crash. They rushed into the children's bedroom and found the two sisters, Janet and Margaret, asleep, but a chair had flipped over and moved a meter across the room, apparently twisting 180 degrees at the same time. Nobody actually saw it, but an hour later, the same thing happened again. This time, the photographer managed to capture it as it came to a rest. Throughout this incident, Janet showed no sign of movement. Gross decided to make sure she was really asleep by gently forcing open an eye. Her eyeball was upturned, her arm was lifted, and it dropped limply back on the bed. It was as if she was unconscious. On the 10th of September, news headlines broke across the country, and the BBC sent a reporter to investigate. He joined Gross on an all-night vigil and also witnessed a very loud crash upstairs in the girl's bedroom and saw a chair chucked across the room. The next evening, Gross arrived at the house to witness marbles zooming around like mad, and he also noticed a curious detail. The marbles never bounced. They would hit the floor and stay put, as if placed there by an invisible hand. As the family sat watching television one evening, one of the drawers under the TV sideboard suddenly slid open on its own in their full view. Within minutes, more phenomena occurred. Gross saw the bathroom door opening and closing on its own 3 to 4 times. At the same time, he felt a sudden cold breeze around his legs and then around his head. Over the next few days, he witnessed boxes and a sofa rose into the air to come crashing down on the floor upside down. He and the photographer set up a camera and managed to capture Janet being thrown off from a bed. The disturbances became so persistent, the family left their house 2 weeks later, seeking refuge with Peggy's brother, who lived nearby. One day, Peggy's sister-in-law was in the kitchen making tea, when suddenly a Lego brick appeared in front of her and dropped onto the table. The entity had followed them out of the house. Based on his experience, Maurice Gross realized that what he was witnessing was some of the most frequently reported phenomena on poltergeist cases. However, realizing he was out of his depth, Gross asked the SPR for backup. A senior member of the society, Guy Playfair, was sent 2 days later. Janet, the 11-year-old child, seemed to be the center of activity. She displayed increasingly aggressive behavior during the haunting and swore profusely. She would suddenly rush across the room and bash her head on the wall, and her family became concerned she would kill herself. She had fits of rage where she would shout and swear and had to be physically restrained. As the haunting intensified, other people began to be affected by the poltergeist. Apparitions started to appear, and a neighbor's brother saw a light about a foot tall burning in a Hodgson's window before fading away. Another neighbor and Peggy saw the same elderly woman in different windows independently of each other. Janet's brother Johnny saw an old man with big teeth staring at him. In all, it was believed that around 15 different people saw some kind of supernatural entity during the haunting. One night in November, Gross decided to communicate with the spirit using raps. 1 for no, 2 for yes. He asked some questions. Are you a male spirit? Knock, knock. Did you used to live in this house? Knock, knock. Was it more than 50 years ago? Knock, knock. Did you die in this house? Knock, knock. Are you unhappy? Knock. Why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? Knock. Are you having a game with me? In response, the spirit threw a cardboard box and a pillow at Maurice Gross's face. In December 1977, 3 months after the start of the disturbances, Janet was pulled out of bed and Gross found her sliding down the stairs head first while she was still asleep. More backup investigators were sent from SPR when an anomalous voice began to emanate from Janet. It started as a series of whistles and dog-like barks and developed into a human voice, that of an elderly male, harsh and guttural and quite unlike Janet's. The voice identified itself as Joe Wilkins and claimed that he had lived in the house. The previous occupant was in fact a Mr. Wilkins who had died in the house, a fact seemingly unknown to Janet at the time. It habitually swore and claimed to be still living and to sleep on Janet's bed. When interrogated, the voice gave further details. I went blind and I had a hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died on the chair in the corner downstairs. Joe Wilkins' son Terry later confirmed that this was indeed how his father had died. When Playfair asked why he wasn't visible, the spirit said, I'm invisible because I'm a G-H-O-S-T. To rule out the possibility of Janet faking the voice, Gross taped out her mouth, but the voice continued. He then asked Janet to hold water in her mouth, which she did, and the voice could still be heard talking. Gross recorded hours of the voice by using a contact microphone placed on the back of Janet's head. A speech therapist who examined Janet said that they couldn't be certain where the voice was coming from, although it bore some resemblance to a false vocal cord tone. There is a voice effect known as plica ventricularis, which is where muscle tension behind the throat can produce sounds independent of vocal cords. However, using this muscle tension to speak often results in an extremely sore throat and can do some serious damage, none of which happened to Janet, who would be able to speak for up to 3 hours in that voice. Since no cause could be found, it was concluded that something was using Janet as an amplifier. Gross and Playfair decided to hypnotize Janet and called in Dr. Ian Fletcher, who was a hypnotist, surgeon, and member of the Magic Circle, one of the most famous magic societies in the world. Fletcher's medical background and his interest in the magical arts were employed to test if Janet might be pulling some tricks herself. Fletcher put Janet into a light state of hypnosis and asked her some questions. Do you know who is doing all this? Me and my sister. Why do you think you are to blame? I don't know who is. What does it feel like? Cold hands gripping me around my body. Who started the trouble? None of us. What is the cause of the trouble? An increase in unhappiness. Fletcher later said, the impression I formed was this is not fraud. She and her sister are doing some of the things, perhaps springing out of the bed, but something else is forcing them to do it against their will. 2 days before Christmas in 1977, the family goldfish died, and Joe Wilkins admitted that he had electrocuted them in their tank using spirit energy. On Christmas Day, the pet parakeet was found dead in his cage. And later that day, Janet was found with a curtain wrapped around her neck. Peggy managed to untangle her, saving her from suffocating. Janet later complained that the knife was following her around upstairs, and Peggy found one of the knives she had just put away on the stairs. The new year of 1978 brought no respite for the family. On Sunday the 15th of January, which was Peggy's birthday, writing in fecal matter appeared on the wall. This was followed by a few days of puddles of diarrhea that was sent for testing at the lab and came back as cat urine. Peggy also saw a man from the waist down walking up her stairs. A few days later, "I am Fred" was found on the bathroom door, written with electrical tape. In May 1978, the SPR formed a committee in order to carry out their investigation. The committee interviewed the witnesses, which they found convincing. They also consulted Charles Moses, an experienced investigator from the Southern California Society for Psychical Research. The committee found that there was good evidence for paranormal phenomena as described by the various witnesses. However, they were reluctant to give credibility to the voice of Joe Wilkins. A year on from the beginning of the haunting, on the 25th July 1978, the family sent Janet to the Maudsley Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital in South London, and the incidents died down, even though the family still saw apparitions. Janet underwent extensive physical and psychological assessment at the Institute of Neuropsychiatry under Dr. Peter Fenwick, and nothing was found to be wrong with her, including brain damage or epilepsy. Janet returned on the 1st of September after being away for nearly 6 weeks, and within half an hour saw the apparition of a little boy. On Monday, 2nd of October, they called in another medium, a Dutchman named Donno, who came to the house and traveled along the astral plane. He was certain that a 24-year-old woman was involved in the case. Maurice Gross had a daughter called Janet, who had died in a crash aged 24, and it was this that had led him to become a member of the SPR. After Donald identified the 24-year-old woman, the incidents tapered off and then stopped. Maurice Gross remained in contact with the family until his death at 87 in 2006. He spent much of his time towards the end of his life defending his investigation of the haunting. Guy Playfair remained an active author, researcher, and member of the SPR Council until his death in 2018. Peggy Hodgson remained in the house until her death in 2003. Janet left home at 16 and married early. Her brother John died in 1981 at the age of 14. Both Janet and Margaret have made several television appearances in subsequent years, where they continue to insist on the authenticity of their experiences. In fact, Janet said in a 2011 newspaper article, "Years later, when Mum was alive, there was always a presence there, something watching over you." The Enfield Poltergeist has continued to fascinate, and several films have been made based on the events. Spielberg's 1982 film Poltergeist was loosely based on what happened. In 2016, The Conjuring 2 by James Wan was made, which featured two paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, visiting the house in May 1978.
I really don't feel good. Is anyone here? What did you find?
You are listening to Supernatural Confessions.